Welcome back, everybody. Today, we are talking about some of the riskiest dynasty assets at every single position before next Thursday night of the NFL draft. I would immediately be trying to deal these guys away if you can, if you could. I know it may just be a little too late for that, but I'm here to let you know who is kind of walking that line of losing some value, maybe even a lot of value post draft, and just here to help you out any way that I can. I've been paying very close attention this draft cycle and may have some information that could steer you in a more safe direction if you were able to get some of these guys off your roster or just become aware of what some teams are likely to do in the first couple of rounds of the NFL draft. Next week is about to change literally everything, and I cannot stress that enough. And I want people to be as prepared as possible. So, with that being said, let's jump right into this thing. Starting off in really a tier of his own, it's hard to find a player who could plummet more in value than Cam Scatterboo after the NFL draft. And at this point, I have just heard the selection of Jeremiah Love's name being floated around too much. It's really hard to ignore. And at first, it just seemed like a few of the small draft analysts that were, kind of mocking him there. And then we started to see Mel Kiper, Jordan Reed, Jeremiah, Dane Brugler, like all mock Jeremiah Love to the Giants. There's been chatter out there that they're very interested in adding an element to their offense like him to Adam Jackson Dart. And honestly, I've really tried to understand why the Giants would take a running back with their top 5 selection when there's just so many needs to address. They just hit on Cam Scatterboo last year. They just hit on Tyron Tracy the year before that as a late round selection. He seems to be a really good backup, and even as a starter, when Scatterboo went down, it just feels like common sense, right? Like, why would they take Jeremiah Love? And well, if the rumors do end up being true, and the Giants do select Love with the 5th overall pick, Scatterboo will unfortunately just be the Giants' version of Zach Charbonnet, who he was when Kenneth Walker was a starter in Seattle. He is ranked around RB21 and has fallen significantly since those reports came out about the Giants being interested about the concerns about Scatterboo's injury. And yeah, like it's very obvious. It's very unfortunate that Scatterboo suffered that injury, and I think we'd be talking about things differently. He had a really gruesome ankle injury last year that you just never want to see on the field. It was pretty gross to watch. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest reason why the Giants are contemplating maybe making this pick to add a different element to that backfield with Jackson Dart. But to kind of give my 2 cents on the situation, and I find myself not making this stance normally when it comes to assets like this. I usually try to be extra safe, but personally, I'm okay holding Scatterboo, and I know that's probably unpopular at the moment, and I'm actually curious to see kind of what his price might be in some leagues. There's an owner who is super spooked about all this chatter and wants to sell Scatterboo for like the 112, maybe 111, but like an early second round pick, like 201, 202. I mean, I'm just gonna try and do that anywhere I can. The draft kind of falls off a cliff at a certain point, and I'm a little bit scared that it might around that range. It's very true that I am one of those people who think the Giants probably taking Jeremiah Love makes no sense. However, I actually do have some far better reasons why I believe they actually won't do it come draft night. Maybe it's just some smoke to get a team to try and move up. Like I said, for one, this is like peak smoke and mirror season. There are stories like this every year that leak for one reason or another. They want to try and get teams to move up, and so that they can move back in the draft in a perceived weaker draft and acquire more picks too. You just get more selections, especially a team like the Giants who just has a lot of holes to fill. It's smart, and like I said, in a weaker class like this, it's not a bad idea to move back a couple of spots, select the player that they actually want at a far more reasonable spot, a far more reasonable price. The second one, and maybe the biggest reason behind my thinking here, is that the Giants hired a head coach that doesn't seem to like want to take a running back in the top 5. It just doesn't seem to like be his mantra. And they hired John Harbaugh for a reason, to help come in to stabilize this franchise. He comes from a Baltimore organization that values the trenches, offensive line, defensive line. He himself and his brother is a defensive coordinator. He's a defensive head coach. And it would just make more sense to have his first selection be on the defensive side of the ball for his first pick of the Giants. Of course, Brian Daboll, if he were still in New York as the head coach, then I would probably believe these reports a lot more. But that's not who in charge. That's not who's in charge now. It's a completely different regime. But I totally get. You never know. The Giants could just make a stupid decision, regardless of how I feel or what I think. I think this is for sure the most volatile dynasty asset going into night 1 of the NFL draft. Scatterboo's value purely relies on the question marks surrounding Jeremiah Love and his landing spot. If he dodges the bullet, he will likely climb, back around the RB15, maybe RB14-ish range, especially we start to hear reports about him being healthier. If he doesn't, he just becomes the Giants' version of Zach Charbonnet, unfortunately, in a worse offense on a worse team. One of the most shiny handcuffs in the league if this happens, and will have no value outside of fantasy, outside of an injury to the guy in front of him, that being Jeremiah Love. And that's just my worry. But I stay in the camp of thinking that they probably are just, having there's a lot of smoke right now, and they're probably just trying to get a team to trade up and come grab Jeremiah Love. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But I think the Giants opt to go defense side of the ball or in another direction. I think they're probably more likely to go receiver than running back. Get Jackson Dart another weapon. Neighbors is coming off an injury. That's just where I'm at the moment. I totally get wanting to sell him. I think he is the most volatile, but just kind of see maybe on the other side of things what the price for him is out there if you got someone who's really, really panicking. And yeah, that's just kind of where I stand on Cam Scatterby at the moment. And it's going to be very, very interesting come night one on the fifth pick of the draft. Everybody's going to be thinking in their head if hasn't been taken already, is it going to be Jeremiah Love? Is it going to be somewhere else? So yeah, I think it's definitely going to be one of the storylines of the draft, and I'm very, very interested to see what their selection is on night one. Now we take a look at some players that I believe are in pretty serious danger of some new target competition in the from the 2026 wide receiver or even tight end class. The guys that I'm mainly worried about, like the tip of the top, of the dynasty rankings, is Garrett Wilson, Rashee Rice, and Zay Flowers. Those two guys are a little bit ranked lower than Garrett Wilson. But speaking of Garrett Wilson, let's start with him. In terms of talent, I don't really think there's a lot of guys in the league who have more talent than him. Unfortunately, we just haven't seen him reach his full ceiling as a player just due to circumstance. The quarterback position, with the Jets has been average at the very best, and he's had a whole lot of guys like Zach Wilson, Mike White, Justin Fields, just really, really bad. And, we had like the best he's had so far is like a 40-plus-year-old Aaron Rodgers who was coming off a torn Achilles. So we never really got to see that come to full fruition because I think he got hurt on like the first couple snaps of the game when he played for the Jets or when he first got to the Jets. I don't want to speak too soon because I think there is hope in 2026 and beyond. Geno Smith does seem like an upgrade compared to what they had, and they have 3 first rounders in 2027. I think they get their franchise quarterback figured out sooner rather than later. But man, this feels a lot like how we talked about Terry McLaurin for most of his career before we saw him, start catching passes from Jaden Daniels. He finally came in. He was able to thrive in fantasy. And will that happen with Garrett Wilson soon? I mean, maybe, but I'm much less sure that it happens, especially if the Jets were to take a wide receiver in round one of this draft. Pretty much every other mock I watch, I happen to see the Jets taking a pass catcher with their second first round pick, not number 2 overall. I mean, I don't think they will, but a lot of the candidates at number 16 is like Micaiah Lemon if he falls, Jordan Tyson if he falls, Omar Cooper Jr. I mean, Casey Concepcion is in play there, Denzel Boston's in play there. The Jets are apparently very, very high on Omar Cooper. I know that report came out recently, but if we see one of these wide receivers taken by the Jets, I do think that he will lose a lot of the things that we fall back on with Garrett Wilson, and it's the hyper forced targeted games, and I think that we see those games likely diminish. Outside of Devontae Adams for half a season, we really haven't seen a wide receiver in the same room as Wilson actually push him for targets in an offense. And when Adams was there, if you can remember, he was very, very productive. Sure, I think you can make an excuse that it's Devontae Adams, one of the better wide receivers we have seen the past 10 to 15 years. And Rodgers and him, they already had a rapport, so it was probably already likely going to happen. Still, though, I think it's a very, very valid thing, a valid concern to, have a first-round wide receiver landing with the Jets. And with the glaring quarterback problem, I'm just not sure that we're going to see a wide receiver one season from him for a little while longer. I'm not out on Garrett Wilson, so to speak, but let's be clear on that because I just want to say he's a phenomenal talent. He's great. We just haven't seen it come to fruition because of the quarterback, and I'm just afraid that it's not going to happen for a little while longer. We're going to have to wait till he's 27, 28. I hope that's not the case, but I think whatever you're doing right now, I think even pivoting to another guy or even downgrading before the NFL draft, cash out on some of the value that he has right this moment. I think it's something that I would definitely be considering. And some options that really, really jump out to me are like Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, maybe even Jalen Brown if you are really in a super competing window. I think AJ Brown's going to probably be on another team, and you could probably get a nice plus on top. Devontae, AJ Brown, Jalen Waddle, they're all kind of similar arguments. Like I said, AJ Brown and Devontae Smith, they're looking like they're going to be playing on different teams in 2026. If that is the case, I think Devontae is a steal at this price. And if you can get a plus on top of him, I love it even more. I'm already kind of baking in the fact that he's going to be the wide receiver 1 in Philly, that AJ Brown's going to be leaving. So he's a super, super big target for me. I love acquiring Devontae Smith any way I can, especially, kind of tearing down in that range. AJ Brown, well, I think we have all heard the Patriots, like the Bills, other teams floated around. Wherever he goes, though, I think that he's going to produce mid to low end wide receiver 1 numbers, just consistent player every single year. And that will get you probably, like I said, a nice plus on top if you were to trade Garrett Wilson in a deal like that. Waddle, of course, is now the wide receiver 1 in Denver. I think his price is kind of has not settled where it should be. I think it's not going to settle. I think he's going to rise even more as the offseason goes along. I have him ranked a little higher than consensus, so he is another target that I would be looking to move off of Garrett Wilson for. There's just a lot of trades that you can make, and Wilson has a lot of name value to him. A lot of people have a lot of hope. Even if with all that being true, I can still understand holding him if you don't want to move him. He's not a player that I am necessarily panicking on. Just take into account though that after the season he will be north of 25 years old. That is typically where we see wide receivers struggle to hold on to that value as a top 12 to 15 option in Dynasty. Jumping over to Rashi Rice, I think this is a guy that a lot of people have probably been trying to sell for quite a while now. His legal issues have loomed all last offseason, all this offseason, and even though there were reports out there that it will not be investigated any further, it doesn't look like he probably looks like he's not going to get suspended. I still struggle to see a world where the Chiefs extend him after all the issues that he had throughout the entirety of his career so far. He has fallen down rankings pretty drastically, pretty dramatically over the past couple months. And since those allegations came out about him, I find a hard time believing too with all of this surrounding Rice over the past two offseasons that the Chiefs haven't at least thought about taking a wide receiver at number 9 in this upcoming draft, or even with their late first rounder that they acquired from the Rams and the Trent McDuffie trade, I believe it's pick 29. I see way too much Carnell Tate, Jordan Tyson, mocked to them by a lot of the most well-respected, well-resourced analysts in the space. For one, I think it actually does make a lot of sense for Kansas City to add a wide receiver anyways. They haven't exactly nailed their last couple of picks at the position, that being Mecole Hardman, Sky Moore, Xavier Worthy. If a scenario does play out like this and the Chiefs do grab a wide receiver at 9 or one of Boston, Concepcion, Cooper fall to them at pick 29, maybe they trade up, I can easily see the value of Rice plummeting down even more. He is in the last year of his rookie deal, and like I mentioned, I don't think the Chiefs really want to extend him for the type of money he's probably going to be asking for. His role has solely been catered to this offense, that has been kind of built around him in Kansas City. And if the Chiefs let him walk in free agency, I am not sure he is putting up even close to the same amount of numbers in any other offense. I realize he might be a little bit of a harder asset to sell right now because of the issues surrounding him, because all the talk surrounding him. Your league mates may already be kind of thinking the same thing that you are. But I don't know. I feel like a lot of these days, depending on what kind of league you're playing in, a lot of them don't see it. They just see the numbers that, kind of show up in the sleeper app that he's been putting up every single year. But if you could make it happen, I would maybe think about pivoting or cashing out for a rookie pick between 105, 106 range, maybe 107 if one of those good wide receivers land there. Assuming that you can get someone to bite, of course. I can somehow pivot and get to Devontae Smith or T. Higgins. I would even go for a Jalen Waddle, Jameson Williams, all, in my opinion, safer options and give me the opportunity to continue competing and don't have, the risk of, or kind of give me the window, open up the window of me just having youth on their side. It would just give me the confidence even more of moving off of Rice for the price that he's kind of going for. For all those people that would rather hold Rashi Rice, I would caution you to know the risk. I just mentioned a bunch of things of why I think maybe you should think about trading him. I do happen to totally get the reward, though, that comes with him if you don't want to move him, assuming that he gets his act together in Kansas City and he stays past his rookie deal. He will probably continue in this offense to put up 18 points per game, maybe even 20 points per game at his ceiling in that offense with Patrick Mahomes. It's just a big risk, though. And he's had too many legal issues for me to bet on it. And I just really, really don't want to do it. He's a risky asset going into the NFL draft. And I think maybe if you can, you should think about shopping him, moving off of guy, pivoting, tearing down, maybe grabbing a high rookie pick. I just don't love it at the moment, especially with all the legal issues surrounding and him being in the last year of his rookie deal. Zay Flowers is the last guy we'll get to. Now, unlike the last two, he doesn't have legal issues and he doesn't have quarterback concerns at the moment like Garrett Wilson does. It's not even a talent issue with Zay Flowers. He's actually a very good NFL player, a very, very good receiver, and has been actually quite good in fantasy since he stepped into the NFL as a rookie, right away. My biggest problem is, one, he doesn't score touchdowns. He has only 16 in his entire career. A couple of those are rushing touchdowns, and he's never surpassed 5 receiving touchdowns either. It's a big problem for me. And the other problem I have is a looming question of what the Ravens do with their first round pick. They currently hold the 14th overall pick, and I do see Tyson, Lemon, Kenyon Sadiq mocked to them quite often. And the reason that the Ravens taking a wide receiver or a skill position player in round 1 scares me is because there's already a volume issue in Baltimore with Lamar Jackson as the quarterback. We know the Ravens have 2 of the biggest rushing threats in the entire league. Lamar uses his legs very often, and Derrick Henry gets his normal 20 to 25 carries a game. Then they know that they like to be in 12, 13 personnel a lot, get downhill, run the ball. I'm pretty sure that the new regime coming in is going to want to do quite around the same thing that they did before. The Ravens also are regularly in the bottom half of the league in passing percentage since 2022. Listen to this. Baltimore has at least been a bottom 3 team in pass percentage per game. That is wild. That's like, I think, 22, 23, 24, 25. The last 4 years, they've been at least bottom 3. In the majority of those seasons, they were dead last. And this isn't really a secret either. We all know that the Ravens run an offense through Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson. And now, if the Ravens brought in another offensive weapon, I would like to think that a chunk of that pie would be taken up by the new receiver, the new tight end coming in. Takes targets away from Zay Flowers, and it's just going to be distributed a little bit more to the rookie, whoever comes in, than I would like. And that's just kind of how it goes. There just hasn't been anyone to kind of push Flowers for targets since he got to the Ravens, and that's kind of my biggest worry as well. Rashad Bateman, incredibly mid, unfortunately. Mark Andrews, he's either been hurt, declining as a player. We didn't even get to see Zay Flowers play with like a peak Mark Andrews. And Isaiah Likely was like a part-time player in that offense. He was like their third best receiving option. Also, it's not like Derrick Henry was soaking up any targets out of the backfield either. That isn't his game. He's just super efficient on the ground. But I imagine that Zay Flowers would probably lose some shine in this scenario where the Ravens take a Jordan Tyson, Mekhi Lemon, uh, Omar Cooper, Denzel Boston, whoever they decide to take. Maybe they decided to pass on him. I don't know. But projecting out those distribution of targets would worry me for him, and I would rather just think about getting off of him now, if possible, maybe buying him back later. If people are really, really down on him, I'm targeting like the 106, the 107 range, kind of like where Sadiq or like Concepcion would probably be going. I would look to move over to like an AJ Brown if I'm in a competing window. A lot of the same names I mentioned with Rice are true here as well. Waddle, Devontae, T. Higgins, Jamison Williams, kind of any of those guys in that range. Those are just the guys that I'm really, really high on. All of those guys I think have probably a higher ceiling in fantasy, have shown a higher ceiling in fantasy, and are kind of all around the same age outside of AJ Brown. I could look absolutely silly, and the Ravens take like a card of something at 14. I know that Vega Ione has been mocked to them a lot, like pretty much throughout the entire draft cycle. In that case, they would still be just fine. Still, I mean, honestly though, still, like, it's not like he's moved the needle in any of the 3 seasons. He's been pretty much around the 13 point per game range, like a high end wide receiver 3, maybe a low end wide receiver 2. And in those 2 years. And then last year he had 14 points per game. So I think he was like a wide receiver 2, but nothing groundbreaking. Just in my opinion, I think you just beware of the scenario where this does happen, where there are targets that are going to be distributed otherwise to someone else, a rookie coming in, a really, really talented player, I think at number 14 overall. And just pay attention to what the Ravens decide to do in round 1 and maybe even beyond, like in the second round in the NFL draft. Moving over here, I have some more wide receivers that I think could take a hit if competition were to be added to that room. They aren't quite in the same categories like Garrett Wilson, Rashee Rice, Zay Flowers, not quite on that level of talent, but still relying on target volume and opportunity in order to be consistent, productive fantasy players in 2026. A lot of the guys that fit this mold are like DJ Moore, Wanda Robinson, Ricky Pearsall, Terry McLaurin. I'm actually going to start in order from most concerned to least concerned out of these 4. So let's start with DJ Moore, because he was just traded to the Bills a couple of months ago and joins Josh Allen as the current number 1 option in Buffalo. The core of my concerns has to do with a couple of things. And the first one, maybe the most important one, I don't know, I guess they're kind of equal. But I mean, I've seen so many mock drafts where Denzel Boston, Omar Cooper, Casey Concepcion, a lot of the guys we mentioned earlier land in Buffalo. And 2, I'm not buying a DJ Moore revival just because he changed teams. What we saw in Chicago the past 2 years was downright atrocious compared to the prices that we have been paying for him in Dynasty, and especially in redraft. We just had way too high of hopes for him, and I just don't think he's the same player at all that we saw, in his first year in Chicago or what he was in Carolina. He has consistently given us stretches where he does literally nothing, and on occasions, he kind of does have his boom weeks, but those weeks where he does give you some nice games are too few and far between. Add on a first-round wide receiver that could be walking into that room with Josh Allen, and I just want to be all the way out at this point. I'm pretty much all the way out, but I think that would just signify it, would just solidify it even more. I am already, like I said, pretty much already out on him, and I have been for a while, but it could get bad pretty quickly if a first-round receiver would to be out of there, especially of the caliber of, in my opinion, Casey Concepcion. I don't know if he gets there, but if he does, I think that would be a wonderful fit. I think he would eat with Josh Allen, and I could just be a hater. But I'm not even sure he's that much better than Khalil Shakir, and I say it quietly at this point because I know a lot of people, there's a lot of DJ Moore fans out there. I don't think the gap is that large. I think Khalil Shakir is a very, very fine slot option. I think DJ Moore is just not as good as he used to be. Personally, I would be trying to move off of DJ Moore even more than I already was. He's kind of already a wild card at this point of his career, and I would just rather cash out on the hype of him being the number one in Buffalo with the Bills, with Josh Allen at the moment. And I think it's a very, very smart thing to do pre NFL draft. I think we see a guy go to Buffalo, night on night one of the NFL draft. I think it's a pretty high chance. So yeah, I think you should be moving off DJ Moore. And Wanda Robinson is kind of a similar argument, in my opinion. He's the number one in Tennessee, just due to circumstance at the moment. He signed a pretty lucrative deal in free agency to have, a pretty good role in this team out of the slot. And that really, I know, it isn't something to scoff at. He had a really, really good year last year. He's been pretty underrated in fantasy. My only holdup is, what is stopping the Titans from grabbing Carnell Tate at number 4 overall? All signs, I guess, I've heard at this point to Jeremiah Love being the selection there. But what if they want to help Cam Ward out instead and go get a wide receiver with their first rounder? I can see it, and I've seen it so many times throughout the offseason, I can't tell you enough. I think it's pretty much a toss-up there what they do. They may even just elect to go off the line, and I think maybe he dodges the bullet there, but what's stopping them from taking a guy at pick 35? What if they decide to move back, like into the back half of the first round, and take like a falling Jordan Tyson, one of the higher tier wide receiver prospects, to add to that room to help Cam Ward out? That would really, really hurt Wan'Dale's value in fantasy. And I'm sure that we would probably see a pretty sizable bump down from him in dynasty rankings. I mentioned two people during free agency, the free agents video that I made, that it'd be probably a perfect time to move off of him because of this exact scenario. His value will never be higher than the contract he just got. Like, he's a wide receiver one in Tennessee in a lot of people's eyes at this point. And I don't think it gets, there's not anybody to target him at the moment pre NFL draft. And that could all change next week. So I suggest you maybe try and shop him, move off of him however best you see fit. Go cross positionally, go grab some picks, pivot to a wide receiver in like the same range as him. Check out the list of guys here that we have around him currently that are on keep, trade, cut. There are plenty of good options here. Be creative too. Maybe try to see if you can tier up by adding a piece to Wandale and get a better asset. Kind of maybe go up into that. Maybe try to go up into the Zay Flower-ish range of guys. Maybe even go up a little bit farther. You can add like a late first round pick to him and go up and get a T. Higgins, a Devontae Smith, AJ Brown, someone like that. So many ways you can go, and I just think you should do it sooner rather than later because next week things can be completely different. Someone I'm similarly worried about is Ricky Pearsall. Maybe some people are more worried than I am, and that's okay. They just added Mike Evans free agency, which almost certainly puts Pearsall at the number 2 amongst the wide receivers. Then you, of course, have George Kittle coming back at a certain point in the season. We kind of don't know when, if he's going to be ready for the start of the year, but that probably definitely shifts him down to the 3rd receiving option. Now, I've seen the 49ers be mocked at a wide receiver at their pick in the first round. That worries me, and at least for 2026. Not only does that mean that they are concerned about Pearsall, staying healthy because he really hasn't at this point, but that may also signal that he is probably going to be a number 2 rather than a number 1 while he is in San Francisco. Hypothetically, let's say they take Concepcion, Cooper, Denzel Boston, and shoot, they may even snag like a falling Jordan Tyson. I've heard so many things about him falling or going higher in the draft. You kind of just don't know what's going to happen at this point. All those scenarios will give me a pause on how I view Pearsall, at least in 2026, kind of make me revisit his ceiling in Dynasty going forward. That really, really pushes his ability to heavily contribute to an offense all the way down to like 2027, which would be year 4 for him. Wide receivers can break out a little late, that's fine. But man, he will be 27 at that point. As much as I love the talent, it just may not be in the cards if the 49ers were to go wide receiver in round 1. Try and see what's out there. Put him on the block, make him part of a bigger trade, because he currently sits around a lot of the guys that I think are really, really good pivotal options. Like kind of pivotal, I guess, so to speak. I would probably think about David Montgomery. Another wide receiver that I would pivot to maybe is Christian Watson, kind of the similar upside type of guy. Those options all provide me with the opportunity to score points in 2026 and would be much more movable in a doomsday situation for Pearsall if they were to go wide receiver round 1. I would really just encourage a lot of you to visit some of these options and consider that the 49ers just may not view Pearsall in the same way that we do, the same way that I do at least. The signing of Mike Evans already was a pretty big sign, and I would rather just not be the one to ignore that. The last guy that we got to talk about is Terry McLaurin, and I'm the least worried about his value kind of taking a significant hit, and that feels weird considering that the Commanders are consistently mocked Carnell Tate, Mekhi Lemon, Jordan Tyson at number 7, and my biggest reasoning for the lack of concern is simple, and it's that I believe Terry McLaurin, in my opinion, is just in another class of receiver than the other three guys that we just talked about. And that's no disrespect, but even at 30 years old, McLaurin, he's still fantastic. He showed it last season in stretches despite Jaden Daniels being injured a lot of the season. The chemistry with him and Daniels is much more potent than we've ever seen with Purdy and Pearsall, and we haven't even seen it with DJ Moore and Josh Allen, Wandale and Cam Ward. We don't know how that's going to work out. If the Commanders were to add a pass catcher at number 7 overall, I do think it helps kind of free him up more than anything. But at the same time, I do think that he loses some of the volume that he might have had if he were to be the only wide receiver in that room. It's kind of the same argument that we made with Garrett Wilson, but on a much better offense. He's a little bit older, and he has Jaden Daniels as his quarterback and not Geno Smith or Ty Simpson, whoever the Jets decide they're going to start the majority of the season. The thing is, too, and I want to point out, Terry has always been super efficient, he hasn't been a volume-heavy type of guy, volume-reliant. Plus, as well, his price in Dynasty is kind of already baking in the age, baking in that they might add a receiver, and I don't think he would actually be pushed down that much further. I just think that he would, he may not be the number one come season's end. This is actually kind of why I want to caution people off on selling him. If you are rebuilding, I just don't think it's the smartest time to move off of him. It's kind of a little bit of a different argument that I made with Pearsall, DJ Moore, and Wandale. Wait till we get closer to week 1. Unless you can get good value, I would just hold off. Wait till we get the hype of a healthy Jaden Daniels. People start getting excited about the Commanders' offense again as a whole, especially if they were to add Jeremiah Love, Cardinal Tate, Mekhi Lemon to this offense. I am taking like I said, a much different approach with McLaurin than I am with DJ Moore, Wandale, and Pearsall. That's why I have him as the guy I am least worried about. They are valued much higher as well and could dip in value a lot more and a lot quicker. Regardless, though, be smart with these assets and do your due diligence pre-NFL draft. Pay a lot of attention to the chatter coming up. This next week is going to be less smoke and mirrors and more of real talk about what these teams actually are going to want to do. So just assess your dynasty teams and think about if it's a good idea to hold off on any of these players if you're currently rostering them. They are some of the riskiest and most volatile at the position as we inch closer to night 1 of the NFL draft. So I would really be considering moving Wandale, DJ Moore, Ricky Pearsall, the guys who I think are more volatile. And also, if you want to move Terry McLaurin, just make sure it's a smart move and you're actually getting correct value back. But yeah, those are the other guys, not quite wide receiver ones, like solidified top wide receiver ones in Dynasty, but guys that I would be concerned about losing value if their teams were to add a wide receiver. Now we move over to the running back side of things, and it's time to have a hard conversation about who is really at risk of losing a grip on their lead role. Although I think this draft class definitely is not the strongest at the position, I do think there are some guys who could slash the workload of some and potentially even unseat one of the starters in the right situation. So let's start with the elephant in the room, because when it comes to this conversation, Tony Pollard is in serious danger, and I think there's a good likelihood, and probably the biggest likelihood out of everybody on this list, that he is nuked into oblivion by Jeremiah Love if he is taken at the 4th overall pick. There is crazy steam that this could be happening in a little less than a week, and if it does, I would not be shocked at all if the Titans cut him. They can save like $5, $6, $7 million. If this happens, he could land a role somewhere else. That very likely could happen, but I think his value dips even more than it already has. He's ranked pretty low. There's pretty much common knowledge at this point, and I think that if this scenario were to play out, and kind of the one that we talked about with Cam Scatterbo, it would just be that he wouldn't have any value whatsoever. I think the Titans would likely just cut him more than keeping him on the team, especially since they have Tyjae Spears as a backup running back. If you are a Tony Pollard owner, just beware. And don't be holding him if there's potential opportunity where someone's looking to buy. If you can add him into a trade, I might be trying to get anything that I can from him, just like anything at all. More of a low-end asset at this point, but still worth mentioning with kind of the questions about where Jeremiah Love will end up on night 1 of the NFL draft. So with that being said, let's move over to some other guys who I think are looking to add running back in this year's draft, and that's going to be number 1, the Seahawks, after losing Kenneth Walker. And that's why I want to chat about Zach Charbonnet. He maybe had the unluckiest run out in terms of how things worked out at the end of the year. He tore his ACL in the middle of the playoff run, which puts him in danger of missing a good portion of 2026, maybe like half the season. I doubt he's ready for the start of training camp. I don't know exactly when he's going to be back. I don't know what the timeline looks about him right now, but if Charbonnet had stayed healthy, we'd probably be looking at him being the full-time unquestioned starter. Instead, there's been chatter all offseason about the Seahawks taking Jadarian Price in round 2. Like even at the end of round 1, which is a little rich for me, like Mike Washington in the 2nd or 3rd round, Jonah Coleman has been floated, Emmett Johnson as well, like early day 3 type of range of things. This could just be another repeat of last season if this were to happen. we could just likely see a split with whoever they take in the draft once he gets back from injury. And that just probably is not something I want to be holding on to at running back 25 prices. I think a lot of people are thinking that once he comes back, he's going to be the full-time starter. Whoever they bring in is going to be the backup. I don't think that's the case. He is super volatile at this point, and the soonest we can probably see him actually starting, assuming the Seahawks take a running back in the draft, which I think it's pretty much almost a certainty that they will, is 2027 when when he's allowed to hit free agency, when he can sign with a new team, or maybe you never know, he re-signed with the Seahawks on a pretty lucrative deal. I doubt it though. They literally just let Kenneth Walker walk out the door after winning Super Bowl MVP. So I doubt that he's retained after this year. It looks like the Seahawks have kind of a different idea of approaching the running back situation. Just kind of look to move off of Charbonnet though right now, and I think a lot of good options are like Jordan Addison, who has lost a ton of value this offseason. He had like another legal thing where I think he was like reckless driving or something like that. Christian Watson, Michael Wilson, all great options. I even like the idea of trying to pivot to Derrick Henry if I am competing, if I really just need a running back. If you want to hold Charbonnet for the possibility of him finding a starting role in 2027, that's fine, I guess, but I don't think it's smart. I can see the vision. Trust me, I can see the people who have that vision. I can see it happening, but just I think there's too much risk. I think you should just know the risk going into draft week and the likelihood that he could be blocked once again from getting significant valuable touches in this offense. And that's my biggest concern. I like Charbonnet, but not that much, not at RB25. Two backs that I want to clump together here and moving on is, I know I mentioned DeAndre Swift as a possible buy, but I'm concerned about him and Chuba Hubbard as well. I think there's clearly one guy I would have over the other, that being DeAndre Swift, but I think they kind of fall into a similar bracket or a similar bucket, excuse me, walking into draft night. The biggest question is, will the Panthers or will the Bears or both elect to address the running back position? Now, I think that the Panthers are more likely to do this than the Bears, but we heard rumblings all last year that the Bears wanted to get Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, and kind of just missed out on them. Teams traded ahead of them. Teams picked right before them. Ben Johnson's offense is really at its best when the running game is humming. Swift and Monangai did a great job of carrying that load last year, but what is stopping them from maybe adding Jadarian Price in the second round? He brings, in my opinion, at this point in Swift's career, a lot more juice, size, explosiveness, and kind of something that they haven't had since Ben Johnson's got there. And honestly, he could be a lot less expensive going forward, assuming that the Bears don't want to extend DeAndre Swift again. I mean, let's think about this. What if they were to trade for Breece Hall, who is also looking for a new deal in New York? A lot of talk about him, being traded as well. I think they would just rather pay someone like him than re-sign Swift again. I think this is a scenario that people haven't considered all that much, especially the NFL draft, them taking a running back, and I think that they probably should. Usually, I know last offseason there was, but where there's smoke, there's fire. The Bears badly want to add a difference maker at the running back position and have kind of for a while, and I'm just not convinced that Swift or Monangai is the answer in that offense. The same thing can be said for Chuba Hubbard, so let's talk about him. He was extended by the Panthers just a few years ago and really has not given them even close to equal value back on the field. A reliable run game would really help Bryce Young take another step. And once again, I'm not sure Chuba or anyone else in that backfield is the guy to truly move the needle. After the unfortunate events that took place with Jonathan Brooks towards ACL, literally just after they drafted him, he had just torn his ACL his last year at Texas, came back towards ACL again, missed all of last season. Maybe they're ready to take another shot in the draft at like a Jadarian Price. It just wouldn't shock me if they were to take a running back on day 2, whether it's Price, whether it's Mike Washington, whether it's Jonah Coleman, whether it's Emmett Johnson on day 3. I think the Panthers would just like to add to that room. And I think if I am a guy who's holding Chuba Hubbard, I would just look to extract whatever value that he has left. Even in a weaker running back class, I think that there are 3 to 4 guys that I would, probably assume that would take over the running back role as a starter, given the opportunity, that being Jonah Coleman, maybe even Mike Washington, but for sure Jadarian Price. And that's just my fear with Hubbard and a little bit less with Swift. But I think these two teams are going to be looking at running back on day 2. And yeah, I would be looking to maybe move these guys pre-NFL draft. And if you want to buy them back later, that's fine as well. It'd probably be just smarter to move off of them now than later. And then the conversation nobody wants to have. What if the Bengals elect to add a running back to this room with Chase Brown? How does this affect his value going forward? Does that mean they don't plan on extending him after the season? It's really hard to say, but all I know is that the Bengals are paying three players on their offense that make a whole lot of money. I don't know if they want to pay a running back. Let's be honest, he isn't a difference maker to a long term deal. From a team building perspective, it makes a lot of sense not to sign him. Even if the Bengals took like Emmett Johnson, Jonah Coleman on day two, or maybe likely early, fourth round, I think this would worry a lot of people for Chase Brown. Those guys seem like someone who could threaten Chase Brown's workload, or at least be good enough for them to allow Chase Brown to walk in free agency. Chase Brown is currently the RB15 right now, and let's think about that because why even bother at this point with the risk? He's ranked ahead of Saquon, Travis Etienne, Javonte Williams, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams, all guys who have long-term deals already. I would much rather pivot to any of them if I can, and I think they would return me just as much value in 2026 as Chase Brown will this upcoming season, assuming that the Bengals don't elect to add a running back. It's also like the Bengals did not spend significant draft capital on him in the first place. I believe they took him in the fifth round when he was taken a couple of years ago. He has, of course, significantly outplayed that value. And I just think maybe though that the Bengals regime might think they can get another one of him in any other draft. And that probably seems arrogant. It probably is, but it just feels like something that the Bengals GM, front office, whoever is in charge would do. It just seems like something that, is very, very realistic. And I think a lot of people should give it some thought. Some other guys I would pivot to, like, give me his teammate T. Higgins or A.J. Brown, Jalen Waddle, Jamison Williams, Baker Mayfield. Give me all of them, honestly, right now over Chase Brown. He's kind of a little more volatile than people think. And at this point in the offseason, we want to eliminate as much risk as possible. And I think he pretty much currently fits right into that category. Maybe not as much as the other guys, of course, but it's just a little bit more of a risk than I like to take on at this point. I could be just totally overreacting, and the Bengals address the positions that they actually need more, that being defense. Either way, you can't argue that the risk is somewhat high for Chase Brown, and something that a lot of people need to be talking about a little bit more. A good player, a really, really good player, but probably replaceable in the eyes of the Cincinnati Bengals. Now we get to some of the middling tight ends in Dynasty that could be at risk to lose a big chunk of their role, a big chunk of their value if their teams were to elect to address a position. Some of the names I'm kind of thinking of are like Mark Andrews, Hunter Henry, Terrence Ferguson, Dalton Schultz, and maybe even Juwan Johnson. I think there's probably a couple names that I am missing, but middling tight end would kind of tell you the range of guys I'm talking about and referring to is like anyone from tight end 15 and lower, maybe, tight end 13 to 14 fit this bill as well. But they're kind of all at risk of teams adding competition to the position and maybe even looking to get younger, add more juice, more versatility. Outside of the wide receivers, I do think that the tight end position is the second strongest position in this class. We, of course, have names like Kenyon Sadiq, who will be a round one guy. And I'm kind of looking at Mark Andrews, Juwan Johnson, Terrence Ferguson, the guys that could be nuked in value if the Ravens, Saints, or Rams were to take him with their first round pick. And as much as I love Terrence Ferguson, I think that's a guy that sticks out over everybody. He was drafted in the second round by the Rams last year. Apparently, they love him. But I've heard Kenyon Sadiq's name far too much at pick 13. It doesn't really make sense to me, but it just doesn't really make me feel safe about him as an option. I'm fine holding him, but I think that people should know the risk of holding Terrence Ferguson at that point, especially considering the smoke with Kenyon Sadiq. Mark Andrews is going to go one of two directions, depending on if Baltimore decides to go ahead and snag Kenyon Sadiq with their first round pick. Of course, they just lost Isaiah Likely to free agency, and we know they love to run like 12, 13 personnel, especially with Lamar at quarterback. They love to run the ball with Derrick Henry. It just wouldn't shock me at all. And yeah, I just think the Ravens could absolutely add to that position, especially Mark Andrews has been declining over the past couple of years. Going over to Juwan Johnson, I haven't heard or seen Sadiq mocked to the Saints very much, but I do think the possibility is there. The Saints could benefit from another weapon next to Chris Olave to help Tyler Shuck out. I can see Kellen Moore just like licking his chops at the possibility of using Sadiq in that offense, the versatility that he could have out in space after the catch. Even just going away, though, from the teams that could take Sadiq, we still have other great tight end options that are projected to go in like the second, third round. We all know, of course, about Eli Stowers, but you also got like Max Clare, Justin Jolie, Oscar Delp, who's risen up a ton in mock draft database, Michael Trigg, Sam Roosh. All these guys are ranked inside the top 120 picks on mock draft database. Nobody is really safe, in my opinion, outside of the 8 to 10 guys, top 8 to 10 guys in Dynasty at the position. And I think it's absolutely a scenario where a team just sees one of these talented tight ends and decides, regardless if they have a Mark Andrews, Dalton Schultz, anybody like that, that they just want to add him to their offense. He could help them, whether as a blocker and as a receiving option or as just a weapon to help their quarterback. This is exactly, though, why I mentioned so much that I like to go cheap at the tight end position and just take my shots in the rookie draft at tight end. And it's because of all these teams being at risk of taking a tight end. And really, outside of like the elite of the elite, I really, really don't want any of these high value guys. Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, Colson Loveland, they're the exception to the rule. If you are holding any of these guys, though, of, like I mentioned, 13, tight end 13, 14, and up, or and down, excuse me, I would just be looking to move them if I could. I think the role could absolutely just be diminished, just be gone completely. We saw this a couple of years ago when Brock Bowers was taken by the Raiders. I don't think a lot of people were expecting them to take him. Michael Mayer was a second rounder. They took him anyway. Brock Bowers is a really good prospect. I think that could happen with Sadiq in the first round to some of these guys. And I think it also could happen in the second and third round. There's a lot of talented tight ends, a lot of guys who could help a lot of these quarterbacks and in their offenses. Just maybe look to add them in a trade, trade them straight up. Maybe add them as a smaller piece in the deal to kind of get like a second round pick in return. It just might be best to eliminate whatever risk you can. I talk about that so much throughout this video, but it couldn't be any more true. And a lot of these guys, like I mentioned a bunch of times, can be nuked into absolute oblivion. Their roles can be completely gone come 2026. I would just rather that not happen for you guys. I want you guys to be as safe as possible, eliminate as much risk as you can. And yeah, if you have any of these high value tight ends or the guys that are valued a little bit higher up, try and move them to see what you can get for them. If not, just be aware of the risks and the fact that these teams could add a guy at the position in that room. That is going to be it for this video, though. Lots of names here that I'm slightly or really, really worried about. They could see a big value decrease after next week. Speaking of, though, despite everything we just talked about, I know there was a lot of bit down on some of these guys, especially, we can see a lot of guys lose roles. I could not be more excited about the NFL draft. It may disappoint us at times with landing spots, and players may decrease in value, but dude, it is so much fun. I cannot tell you enough how much I enjoy it. I hope you guys will be watching along like I am. I am going to be very, very busy this next week helping you guys out, making videos to just help you get ready for your rookie drafts, give you all the information you need, all the information you want. Big, big, big week ahead. And also, let me know if I missed anyone, and if you think I'm wrong about some of the players that we talked about. I love to be challenged in the comments. I love having this conversation with you guys. It's so much fun. I find it super, super refreshing to converse with everyone. Anyways, though, like always, I hope everybody has a great week, and I will see you guys next time.